welcome. I'm recording this episode on Monday evening, so it's actually just coming up to 8 o'clock in the evening here in Abingdon. I couldn't record yesterday. There was so much going on. There were just lots and lots of things happening, including some things that I'll be talking about later. But it just meant that yesterday just was a non-starter in terms of recording, so I'm recording today instead for you. So introductions. My name is Gerard, or Peter, or Boniface. I live in Abingdon-on-Thames in Oxfordshire in the south of England, 7 miles south of the city of Oxford, with my two cats, Toby and Bunty, who may or may not put in an appearance this week, who knows. They're very much a law unto themselves. And I knit and crochet and weave and do all things fibre. So that's the introductions over. So, without any further ado, what are we going to talk about this week? Well, there's been a lot going on at work. Oh, here comes Toby. I think he'll probably be making an appearance shortly. There's been a lot going on at work. We've been continuing to open normally, well, under the revised arrangements of the lockdown situation that the UK is in at the moment. The government announced yesterday that there is going to be a slight loosening of the regulations, but not to the point where it actually affects what we're doing or where we are in terms of allowing people to sit in the cafe and that kind of thing. So we will be continuing on pretty much as normal. We still have one or two customers who don't seem to realise that there is a global pandemic going on. I mean, what can you do? And who seem to think that they ought to be able to carry on living their lives as if nothing were happening, which, hopefully one day we'll get back to that, but we're not there at the moment. Yes, we have one or two people who are living as if nothing has happened and there is no change to the world around them, but most people, are being sensible and taking sensible precautions to avoid any difficulties. What else has been going on? School, not a lot of change there. We have a few pupils in the school because their parents are key workers or because the child themselves are in some form of social care order, which means that it would not necessarily be the best thing for the child to be left alone at home without support at this particular moment in time. So we have a few teachers who are in manning the fort, as it were, and keeping things ticking over for those pupils. We're not expecting, well, the government was saying that the schools won't reopen until the beginning of June at the very earliest. To be honest, I don't see that happening straight away, at least not in any significant manner. I think eventually some years will be allowed back into school, but it's going to be fairly limited and for a limited period as well, I just thought. Overall, though, I think people are feeling happier. It's certainly a lot sunnier outside than it's been. We had a beautiful day on Saturday. It was 24 degrees Celsius, which is very warm for May. But then Sunday, the temperature dropped to 12 degrees Celsius, where it has firmly remained. In fact, we're due for even colder weather on Wednesday this week before it starts to warm up again. There's an Arctic blast come our way. I don't know why, but I certainly remember as a Boy Scout back in the day, so back in the very early 1980s, being on a scout camp in the Peak District. And for those of you who don't know the geography of Britain particularly well, the Peak District is just to the top of the Midlands and the bottom of the north of England. So it's the beginning of the Pennine Mountains that separates the east from the west at the north of England. And so the foot of that particular mountain range, most of which are not particularly mountainous, but they're called mountains, more like very big hills, but anyway, not quibble over words. Several of them do meet the requirement to be mountains, but the Peak District is in Derbyshire, which is a very beautiful part of the country. But I remember being in the Scouts camping in June, and it snowed while we were there. And although it's called the Peak District, we weren't particularly high up. We were in one of the valleys at the time, so it wasn't as if we were on a high exposed peak. It was just not very warm. Washing in that river every morning. Oh my goodness me! The things we do as children, the things that adults make us do as children. Anyway, I survived, and I'm here to tell the tale. So this kind of cold blast is not completely unexpected and unprecedented. It's just it's just remarkable, really, that it happened. That one day we're at 24 degrees Celsius, and the next day we're at 12 degrees Celsius. It's a sudden, chilly downturn, and it's become very windy as well. So anyway, that's the weather forecast, or rather the weather review, I guess. But the warm weather of last week certainly put people in a fairly positive mood, I think. And of course, on Friday, we had a limited celebration of the 75th anniversary of VE Day, Victory in Europe Day, so the end of the European part of the Second World War. I'm not myself. VE Day doesn't mean that much to me. Both of my grandfathers were, sorry, two of my three grandfathers, because one was a step-grandfather, but both of my father's fathers were in Burma for the Second World War, and my father's birth father was killed by the Japanese in Burma in the prisoner of war camp. And in the same prisoner of war camp, my step-grandfather survived, and he wasn't liberated, of course, until VJ Day, which is the 15th of August. In fact, it was the 16th that they were actually liberated. And the 15th of August in the Catholic world is the feast of the Assumption of the Blessed Virgin Mary into heaven at the point of death. And so the grandfather I knew was very much devoted to Our Lady, and made sure that his son and his grandchildren were also very devoted to Mary. And my grandfather only ever told me two stories about his time in the war, because I think it was simply too traumatic for him to recall. One of the stories was a very graphic, horrible story, which I'll not tell. Sorry, there were three stories, but the one I'm not going to tell, it was too graphic and awful to retell. But the more happy memory was on the night of the 14th of August, the chaplain in the camp, who was also a prisoner, reminded the Catholic inmates that it was the eve of the celebration of the festival of the Assumption of Mary, and they prayed the Rosary, and the war ended the next day. Obviously, for him, it was all part and parcel. We know that politically there were other things going on, and the terrible tragedy of nuclear weapons, and so on and so forth. But it just sealed in his own personal spirituality the centrality of praying the Rosary. So I will be keeping my powder dry, as it were, until VJ Day, which for me and my family is a much more significant anniversary. My poor father never actually knew his own father, because he was only born in 1941, and my grandfather died in 1943 in Burma. So he never actually got to meet him, which is a great shame. But then he was very well loved and cared for by his stepfather, my step-grandfather. And we never referred to him as step. He was just granddad. But technically, obviously, he wasn't his natural father. But he was as good a grandfather and as good a father as you could hope someone could be. So that was a happy end, as it were. So I don't know why. Oh yes, because it was VE Day. So we had some celebrations for VE Day, but obviously the big celebrations that had been planned couldn't go ahead because of social distancing. But on the whole, I think people managed to celebrate what was a significant event. So there we are. So moving on to all things fibre, I have dug up. Well, I have two works in progress, which I will show. Oh, hello, Bunty. Do you want to come and say hello to the nice ladies and gentlemen? Here we go. There's my little Bunty. There we are. There's a good girl. Now you can sit on my lap, except you can't really because I've got to lean down and get things, but I'll work around you, shall I? I have been working on my cardigan. It takes a long time to complete a row, but I have managed to do some. So I have just finished the first of the three colours. So it's at the top of this cardigan. This is, sorry, I should do this properly. This is Downz Day Off cardigan, which is an interweave pattern. I've talked about it before, and it's a crocheted cardigan. I'm using a well, slightly bigger than 4-ply yarn, but I'm using a 3.5mm hook. And it's a charcoal grey cardigan that then has these 3 bands of colour at the top, around the yoke and the front of the cardigan, and then they are repeated but in reverse order at the bottom. So whereas that goes yellow, white and blue, this will go blue, white and yellow. And I've managed to complete the first band of blue, and I've just, as you can see, started on the grey again. And I think the blue makes it easier to actually see the, I just want to make sure it's in focus. I think that's probably right. You can actually see the herringbone stitch that little bit better in the lighter colours. So it's a very simple pattern. For those who don't know the herringbone stitch, it's done like a normal treble crochet or double crochet in US terms. You yarn over and put the hook into the stitch. Then you yarn over and pull through the loop, but then you also pull that through the yarn over that you originally put on the hook. Then you chain 1, and then you yarn over and through 2. So it just produces a stitch that leans over to the side, and then when you're coming back the other way, it's leaning the other way, and so you end up with this herringbone pattern of stitches. And it's really nice. I'm enjoying it, but it's a fairly mindless crochet, and that's brilliant for taking to work, for the quiet times in work, or for just doing around the home when I'm watching TV or listening to something, or watching podcasts. Excuse me, Bunty. There we go. Thank you. Excuse me. I'm just going to have a drink. This is pink grapefruit juice. I love pink grapefruits. Anyway, I still seem to be a bit wheezy. I can't tell whether it's the after effects of having had COVID-19, in all likelihood, or whether it's my hay fever or a combination of both, but it's still quite nasally and quite breathy at the moment, but hopefully it won't interfere with your enjoyment of the podcast too much. So I'm moving along with the cardigan. I have the other 2 colours that will be added, and in fact with the charcoal as well. So this is the Katia Merino Fine is what it is. That particular charcoal is a different weight, but it's basically the same thing. And this is, let me just see what we have. This is 52% wool, 48% acrylic. It's really, really soft. I'm guessing it's probably a superwash. Oh no, it's a virgin wool. Oh. I don't know. It feels like a superwash. Oh yes, it is a superwash. It says at the bottom. That's fine. It's got all the ingredients here, and then it says on the other side that it's a superwash. I don't. People who design labels. So that's the kind of mustard color, which is color 15, and that's the white, which is color 3. Not the most imaginative naming system for colors, but I guess it works when you've got a large range. I still prefer names for colors. I think it evokes something when you're using them. But there we go. It is what it is. So that's coming on, and I'm quite relieved at the moment to be doing the color stripes, because although the yarn is really nice to use, you can have too much of the charcoal grey, just doing charcoal grey for 300 stitches, then 300, well, I think it's something like 289 stitches across, and then 289 back, and then 289 across, and 289 back. It's a little bit. So having 2 rows of 3 different colours interspersed with 2 rows of grey is actually quite a pleasant change on that one. The other work in progress was actually one I'd forgotten about. I stumbled across this. I mean, I remember casting it on, but I'd not looked at it for probably 4 months. I put it down somewhere safe and promptly forgotten where I put it, that I put in it, that I put it there, as it were, put in it, that I put it there. So this is just a vanilla sock that I am doing on a cuff down, which is not my normal way of doing socks. I normally prefer to do toe up. So this is branching out for me. I used a long tail cast on, so it's a very stretchy cast on, which is good. A very stretchy cuff, and I've done the ribbing at the top, and I've done a few rounds of knit so far. The yarn I'm using is a self-striping yarn called, let me get my glasses back on. The trouble is, if I wear my glasses, actually it's not doing too badly today. Oftentimes it reflects and you can't see my eyes, and I think it's nice to be able to see the eyes of the person who's talking to. So I'll leave the glasses on for the rest because it's just easier than taking them off and on. This is Stylecraft Head Over Heels All Stars, or All Stars Head Over Heels, I guess. If I put it in front of my face, it'll focus on that instead of on me. And it is, let me see, it is the Splash colorway, and it's 75% superwash wool and 25% nylon. It feels, I mean, it says it's a superwash. It doesn't feel nearly as soft as the other superwash, but then it's got more wool content. It still feels a little bit scaly. I'm not affected by wool, so it doesn't feel itchy to me. But I can feel the surface of this yarn more than I can with other superwash yarns. I don't recall how much this cost, but it wasn't very expensive. It probably cost me $3.99, possibly $4.99, which for a sock yarn is actually very good value. It is 400 meters, 437 yards for those who prefer imperial measurements, and it's just a 100-gram ball. And I love the, I mean, this is very me, the kind of turquoise and aqua interspersed with the magenta and the purple and the kind of pink blush color, which I've already got a little bit of that orange that's in there as well, just here, so just below the cuff, or at the bottom of the cuff. I think I did a 1x1 rib. I don't think it was anything. Yes, it's a 1x1 rib. So this is going to be a purely vanilla sock. I've not yet decided whether I'm going to do an afterthought heel or whether I'm going to do a heel flap and gusset. I don't have to decide that till I get to where I need to. I'm also undecided how long to make the socks. I have quite big feet, so I have to always err on the shorter side for socks. But I quite like calf length socks anyway, so, or half calf length socks. So I've not yet fully decided whether to make them into shorties, in which case I have to make the decision about the heel now. Because I have literally, I've done one round since, have I? Have I actually? Yes, I have. That's all knit stitch. Yes. No, it's not. Oh. Oh, hang on a sec. Have I? Yes, that's all knit stitch. Yes, it is. So I just have to make a decision on what I'm going to do with that, which I will do. So I think, I'm not sure actually. No, that looks like I've now moved to knit 2, purl 2. I don't think I was doing anything other than, yes, it's so I'm onto a knit row, and yes, I've just got to make a decision. These are my Knit Pro Zings, 2.5mm. If I put a hand in front of my face, it might show you, but I can't see now because the hand's in front of my face, so I'll just have to hope to that one. As I've said previously, I really enjoy using Knit Pro Zings. I even enjoy using the crochet hooks. But again, I'll talk more about that in a minute. I keep that sock in this gorgeous little bag that was made for me by the very talented Alex, who is one of the makers in the shop. It's a nice little drawstring sock sack, and this was actually made for a workshop that I attended, and so these are all little appliques of different socks. There we are. If I can get that into focus for you. And we were making miniature socks as part of an advent calendar, which I've not pursued through. We were really doing the miniature sock as a way of being able to complete a sock in a single workshop lesson, because the person leading the workshop was teaching a particular type of heel flap and gusset on how you actually pick up the stitches without leaving a hole, and it was really very successful. She was using a pattern that was on Ravelry. We bought a copy of the pattern each, and she taught the workshop based on that with the permission of the pattern's author. And if I can dig out the details for that pattern, I will, so that you know what it is. And it was very successul. I can't remember where I put the little sock now. It's in one of my collection things. I usually hang it up in the fireplace for Christmas. But it's an adorable little duffel sock sack. Yeah, so that's that. So that's the works in progress, other than the things that you already know that I'm working on. I thought I'd talk a little bit about my weaving. Oh, but before I do, time of day. One of the reasons why I wasn't able to record yesterday is because I was actually working on some tutorials that I have recorded. I have started a second channel of hand-me-downs crafts, and that's a channel that's totally devoted to tutorials, because I thought if I put them onto this channel, it would get mixed up with the vlogging that I'm doing, the kind of vlog cast. Never really know what to call a podcast on video, because it's not technically a podcast, because a podcast is played on an iPod, which is entirely audio. So it's an odd state of affairs, but we'll call it a podcast for the sake of ease, because vlogcast is just difficult to say, frankly. And that channel has started with the tutorials on how to do the various techniques required for this wrap that I have designed. This is my beachcombing wrap, and this is the crochet version. So I've done one tutorial on the foundation stitch, because I use foundation treble crochets, or if you're American, foundation double crochets. And I use the foundation double simply because it provides a stretchier beginning, and it allows the beginning of the work to match the end of the work. I find with foundation chains that they can be quite tight, particularly for me because I have a tight gauge, tight tension. So I did one tutorial on the foundation row, another one for the cables that run down the spine, because this construction is the cabled spine. Then I did another one on picking up the stitches along the side, and then another one on the broomstick lace, which is the lacy frill single strands going across at various points in the wrap. I have made them live, but the pattern isn't yet quite finished. I just need to finish off the formatting of the pattern, and then I'll be uploading it to Ravelry. So I will put a link to the pattern in the description box below, but it won't be there until the pattern is live because I don't know what the link is until the pattern is live. But I will also put a link to the tutorial channel. And my intention is that I may do other tutorials as well on there for things that I'm doing. And I'm happy to receive any suggestions. I've had one person already mention that they'd like to know something about Tunisian crochet, so I can certainly help with some of that. And really anything that I come across that I think, oh, that would be interesting, then I will just record a tutorial and put it onto that channel. I think I will talk. I'm not going to record for very long tonight because I have this hay fevery congestion going on, and it's making me feel uncomfortable. Although I will stand Wall back up the right way because he deserves to be seen properly. There we go. So I have yet more acquisitions. One of them arrived today, so I'll talk about that one first. And it's the latest issue of Block magazine. For those of you who are not aware, Block magazine is from Missouri Star Quilt Company, and Jenny Doan on the front cover is the kind of face of the company, the matriarch, and she has a fantastic tutorial channel on teaching people how to do all of the blocks that are in the magazine, in fact. And although I'm probably not going, I love the pinwheel. I think that's fantastic. And it's a 3-dimensional pinwheel on this occasion. There's I don't know if you can see clearly, but those are actually 3-dimensional pinwheels rather than just the flat version. I don't make many quilts, but I do often make the individual squares because I quite like the individual squares, and I often give them away to people as coasters. And I find that the patterns that they produce are simple enough for non-experts like me to be able to follow and to be able to get a halfway decent result at the end as well, which, because I'm not massively into sewing, I just do a little bit of sewing from time to time. It's quite important that that it is straightforward, because if it were not straightforward, I'd probably just lose patience with it as much as anything else. If nothing else, though, it's a beautifully presented little book, and I've got quite a series of these now on the shelf, and the colours on the edge look really nice as well when they're on the shelf. So that arrived today, so I've not really looked into that one yet. I have a couple of other acquisitions that I want to just briefly touch on. I will turn the camera, if I may, just a little to the window to show my biggest recent acquisition. This is a weaving loom. It's another Kromsky loom, and that's the largest of their non-floor looms, as it were. So these are looms that are designed for small spaces such as I have available, so they're not taking up a huge area within the room. It's exactly the same as all my other rigid heddle looms, except it's bigger, so it has its own stand. All of the others I can actually rest on my lap against the table and work on, but that one is just that little bit too big for that, so I use that with the stand that they provide. And it's actually quite a nice piece of furniture as much as anything else. I have started weaving on there, but I need to sit down and just finish that one because it's quite a long piece of cloth, but it's going to be quite nice, and is worked in 4-ply because it's quite a narrow heddle. So there are more what they call dents per inch, which are the number of holes, or really it's with a rigid heddle there are lots of reeds, and the reed has a hole and a slot associated with it, the slot being the gap between this reed and the next reed. And so the dent is the combination of the numbers of slots and holes per inch. So obviously the thinner the reeds, the more holes and slots you have, and so the smaller the weight of yarn can be. If you've got quite a wide or a small dent number, so if it was 8 dents per inch, then you've basically only got 4 reeds because you've got 4 holes and 4 slots, and that's 8 dents. If you have a 16 dent per inch, then you've got double the number, so you actually have 8 reeds with 8 holes and 8 slots corresponding, and so you can use thinner yarn and not have a kind of, I mean, you can use a bit like with knitting and crochet, you can use a thinner yarn with a larger, in this case a smaller number of dents, and just have a more flimsy fabric, a more gappy kind of appearance, and that can be a design choice. So you must never say, oh, I'm using 16 dents and therefore I must use this size yarn, or I'm using 8 dents and therefore I must use this size yarn. You're in charge of the process. You make the fabric that you want to make, and it's not up to anybody else. They don't have to like it, but they don't have to pass any judgment on it either. It's your work, not theirs. Sorry if I get very animated when talking about things like that, but teaching workshops and leading demonstrations and teaching knitting as I do, what I hear all the time is, so-and-so said that this is what I should do, and I should do this, and I should be doing that, and I shouldn't be doing this, and there are no rules. Who is this person who is making all these rules? You're in charge of the process. It's your piece of work. The whole point about making it yourself is you are making it the way you want it to be. Yes, there will be designers. Yes, there will be ideal weights and sizes and all the rest of it. But the final choice is yours. You're the person making it. You're the person using it. So, I do get very animated about that, but I make no bones about it and no apologies for it. If you want to have the way things should be done, then buy it. A machine can do it the way it should be done a lot quicker and a lot cheaper than you yourself can make it. If you're going to hand make something, enjoy the process of hand making. Do what feels right to you, because that, at the end of the day, is all that matters, so that when you've finished a piece, it's full of love and all of your creative energy, and not a chore that you've hated and that you have forced yourself into a straitjacket of this is what I must do. Anyway, rant over, but I don't make any apologies for the rant. Excuse me. And I mean, I do acknowledge, sorry, rant not over. I do acknowledge that if you're making an item and following a pattern and it's a fitted garment, for example, then you would be wise to follow the recommendations of the maker. But if you are able to adapt it so that it will do what you want it to do, then I say go for it. It's entirely up to you what you do, and if it looks the way you want it to look, then mission accomplished. Anyway, leave all that behind. So I bought the large loom, and that means I now have 3 looms of different sizes, because I also, at the same time, bought the smallest of the Crochet looms. So those are Crochet harps, and this is the Crochet Presto. And this is exactly the right width for weaving scarves or placemats, things like that. Or even dishcloths and tea towels, although they'd be quite narrow for tea towels, but I think you could still get away with it. They might have the wrong kind of dimensions, but you're the person in charge. If you want to make a tea towel on this, you make a tea towel on this. This is the loom. Oh yes, so that's the Presto loom, and it has the Presto emblem there. But this is made by Crochet and Sons. Ashford, I know, make a similar sized loom, and I've mentioned before why I use Crochet rather than Ashford, which is more about convenience than anything else. In terms of the price, they are pretty much comparable. In terms of the quality, they are pretty much comparable. And in terms of the way they work, they are pretty much comparable. So whichever you buy, will be straightforward and easy to use, so don't stress about it. So I have made several scarves. I haven't got those scarves because they've been given as gifts, but I will. I'm pretty sure I took photographs, so I will dig some photographs out. I went through a period last summer. Well, I was at my mother's actually, so it must have been last spring, so a year ago now. I went through a process of making a scarf a day. It's a very quick process on a small loom like this. It takes maybe a couple of hours to loom it all, to warp it all up and onto the loom to get going, and then maybe an equivalent amount of time to actually weave it. And I just did a very simple finish. I hem stitched both ends using the warp thread, the weft thread rather, and then used the warp threads at both ends to make tassels to hold everything in place, and it looked very effective. So they were just used tied overhand knots and all that kind of thing, and it was all very simple and straightforward. So if I can, I will put some photographs in here of that. And this loom is not that much cheaper than the big one. I mean, it is cheaper, but it's less than £100 cheaper. So you're paying, I suspect, because they're using basically the same. The only thing that's really differing between the different sizes is the width of the wood, or the, if you like, the length of the bars. So the actual heddles, the whatever this thing is called, and I can't think of the word for it at the moment, but the thing with the heddle sits in, the looming bar and the warping bar and the warping rods and the shuttles. The only thing that differs between these and the ones for the big one is just how wide they are, how long each piece of wood is. So the amount of work that goes into making the looms is about the same regardless of the size, is what I'm trying to get at very inarticulately. Hello, Toby. But if you're not sure that you actually want to do weaving, and you're unsure about spending a few £100s, which I fully recognise, I myself at the moment, because of the lockdown and other constraints, don't have much disposable income at the moment. So I fully appreciate that sometimes money is tight, but we still want to be able to try out new crafts and new ideas. It is possible to do things on the cheap. Now this, I can't remember the name of this loom. I will look it up. This is a children's loom. Instead of having a single heddle, what it has is two boards with slots in, and you simply lift and raise by turning the dowel at the top, and it opens, and you can see it opens and closes the shed in exactly the same way as moving the heddle to the up and the down position would. And then it has a separate beater for the weaving. Now the weaving obviously happens here, so you have that up there. You do the weaving and then you beat it down, and that's fine. This will work perfectly well, and it costs, I think this cost me £20. And I will put a link, I got it on Amazon, I will put a link. Although it is very much a children's loom, in essence, you can do as good a plain weaving job on this loom as you can on the more expensive, more professional looms, as it were, the more grown-up looms. And as a taster, I've used this in weaving demonstrations. As a taster, it gives you all of the basic techniques that you need to be able to start doing plain weaving. So that might be another option for people. And it's only made of a soft pine kind of wood. It's nicely made, but it's very simple. It's not anything exciting, but it is very nicely made, and it does work. And I know it does work because I have done some plain weaving with some of my ladies, and you can see we've actually done different colour weaving and all the rest of it here, and it does work. So I can recommend that if you want to try something like that, that might be another option. What I would say is that whereas my Inca loom is very much rather a very much a warp-faced weave. This is very much a weft-faced weave. So the relative thickness of the yarn used for the weft overrides the plainness of the yarn that's the warp. Whereas in the other one, the weft just pushed the warp forward, which is what made it a warp-faced weave. So it's not quite the same as a normal loom, but it's a very good alternative. Certainly to give things a try and see whether or not you like it. So I just thought I'd mention that because it doesn't always have to be the most expensive option first. And even though it's a children's toy, it works perfectly well and is perfectly usable as an adult loom for making things like scarves and placemats, very much like the Presto loom. It's slightly narrower, but only slightly narrower, and certainly you could make lengths of cloth and then sew them together as well. So there's no real limit. Just because a loom is narrow doesn't mean that you can only make narrow things. It just means you have to sew together lengths of what you make and make a feature of that fact, maybe. So have horizontal and vertical and all kinds of different color combinations. Again, it's only limited by your imagination, your creativity. So staying on the weaving topic for a moment, Mason's at my local yarn shop was having a bit of a clear out last year. Stock that they'd had for a long time that was still upstairs and wasn't selling because they'd got it in and see whether anybody wanted it, and nobody seemed to want it, so they were clearing out a lot of stock. And I bought 2 lots, which I will be turning into scarves, and possibly I think there's probably enough here for 2 scarves in each colour. So this is the Sirdar Sylvan. I will take one out of the packet just so you can see it better. It's a thick and thin chunky yarn. So it's one of those where it's very tightly spun and then very loosely spun. So you get variation in the texture when you use it for knitting or weaving or crochet or whatever. This is 90% acrylic and 10% wool. And let me just see, it is any more information that's any use? Not particularly. They recommend a 6.5mm hook or knitting needles. So it is a chunky yarn, and I would imagine that once it's been blocked it actually probably swells quite a lot as well. If I put it in front of my face it'll stop focusing on me and start focusing on the yarn. I love as you know from the other things that I'm working on, I love that kind of flame red and the purples and the magentas that come through in a colour like this. Unfortunately it doesn't really have, it's shade 203, which is not very exciting, but there you go. And I also have, so there's 10 balls at 50 grams each of that, and I have it also in the 205 colourway, which is this lovely purple with lilacs and it's lavender, I guess, and yeah, and almost a maroon colour deep inside there. And that's another 20 balls. Sorry, another 10 balls of that. So that's another 500 grams. And I think each pack cost me £20. So sometimes your local yarn shop can give you very, very good value for money on deals when they're trying to clear old stock that just isn't selling. I'm not sure that I would necessarily have chosen that, but now that I've got it, I can actually see how I would use it. So what I'm intending to do is warp up my Presto loom and just make a few scarves on that for people. And if I make them now, then they're ready for September and October birthdays, which is more or less when they'll actually start being useful, although they could certainly be used around about now. Oh, I don't know how that got in there. That normally hangs on my wardrobe door. This was made for me. I can't remember who made it for me. I think it was Daisy. I think it was Daisy is the now nearly 9-year-old daughter of Jeanette and Terry, who used to own Willows, which means that her mother probably helped. I can't honestly remember who made it. I think it was Daisy. Anyway, yes, there we go. It's beautiful, lovely owl. I have a few more little acquisitions. So this is Sockenwolle socks wool. It is, with a name like that, I'm guessing German. Yes, made in Germany, in Ingolstadt. And it is colour number 11, which is not very exciting. 75% wool and 25% polyamide, which is, I love the colour. I love the subtle hints of brown in there as well as the mustard and blue. I think the blue and yellow goes really well together anyway. And it's a kind of lapis blue. It's almost a royal blue. It's such a deep, rich colour, rather than the bright blues or the dark. Toby, what are you? Honestly, if only you could see what I can see. I can see a cat struggling to get out of a bag that he's climbed into and fallen over on. Move your bottom out of the way, you silly monkey. Honestly, what are you like? Yes, I know it's a bag. But it's not a bag for you, it's a bag for me. Oh dear me. Oh dear. Anyway, thank you, Toby, for the light entertainment. Now, so that's the Sockenwolle, I think it's called. It's a 4-ply. I'm guessing that means sock wool, but anyway, I'm not a German speaker, so I do apologise to anybody who is, and who I might be deeply offending by my poor attempt at German pronunciations. Yes, so this is a Debbie Bliss Blueface Leicester. And this is a DK, but most Debbie Bliss DKs are actually not DK. I find they tend to be slightly thinner than the official yarn size. Her recommended needle size is a 4mm, so maybe this is a proper DK. Normally she advises to use a size down from the normal needle size. This is 100% Blueface Leicester wool. It therefore, I don't think it's a superwash either. It's called pale blue, which is, I guess it is pale blue. I'd have called it duck egg myself, but we'll go with pale blue because that's what she's called it. It's quite crunchy, so I don't think it's superwash, but I just love this. And I think this would be quite nice as an accent colour in something, rather than as a standalone. For me, it's got, I don't know quite yet what that will be, but this was something that I think I may even have been given this. I don't think I bought this. I think I was given this because I don't normally buy Debbie Bliss. I don't have a problem with Debbie Bliss, I just don't normally buy Debbie Bliss wool. So I think this was a gift from somebody. I think this might have been Alex. I think this was one of the animal yarn fibres that she was sensitive towards, and so I swapped her a few silk hanks, and she gave me quite a few more pure wool balls and hanks, which is why I call it a gift, because although there was a swap involved, I didn't give to her nearly as much as she gave to me. But that's fine, you know, she's a generous person, and it's important to accept gifts as in the manner by which they're given, which is positively and with thanks for the generosity. It's very difficult accepting gifts, but it's actually important that for the giver that we do accept their gifts with good grace, because it's a nice feeling to give somebody something, and what you don't want is them, oh no, you shouldn't, oh no, I shouldn't, oh no, you shouldn't have done that for me. I mean, no, they shouldn't, but they have, so just be happy with the fact that they have. Excuse me a second. As you can tell, I'm constantly having these conversations in my own head, so that's why I share them with you. And these are, I think, the final things that I bought from Unravel. So I will get them all out because they're all much for muchness. I'll start with the nice things first. This is a hook gauge. Nobody ever seems to know how to say this name. I always think it should be pronounced Schkepisch, but I have no idea because I don't speak Dutch. But that to me is what that's saying, is Schkepisch. So if anybody actually knows how to say sheep is, please let me know, because I'll be very happy to hear it. But I like this because this is actually a proper hook gauge. I find I can use needle gauges on some of my hooks because they actually have a round end. But many of them, the end is wider than the actual measurable part of the hook. And the nice thing about this hook gauge is that all of the holes for measuring are on the edge, so you can just slide your hook in and take it out, so that you will always know what size the hook actually is, rather than necessarily depending upon what you may be able to see written on the side. And I love the sheep on it as well, so that was really the reason I bought it. But this is quite a useful thing in its own right, and it's quite nice to see something being made specifically for crocheters and not just for knitters. And it's not even doubling up, although you could use it to do knitting needles. It's not intended for needles. It is intended for those of us who crochet as well. So I like that. I didn't know I'd got this bag until I just opened up. I'd obviously not noticed that they'd popped this freebie in. So this is another little canvas, well, not canvas, calico sock sack. Socks in progress, as it says. It's a nice drawstring sack. And actually, I think I could get more than just one pair of socks in here. But it's a nice little bag, and I shall certainly be using it. And I had literally no idea that was there, and don't recall ever having seen that, so I didn't notice that I'd got a freebie when I bought my wool in the first place. So the wool, and it is from the company. So this is Co-op Knits. You can see the company name there. I don't know. There we are. That's got you in focus. I just need to make sure that I'm looking at the camera and not at the screen next to the camera. So this is Co-op Knits Sock Yeah. And this is a fine superwash merino wool, 75% and a 25% nylon. It's a 4-ply, which means it's a 2.25mm needle, and it's 212 grams because they're 50-gram hanks. So this colour is Axonite, which I don't, yes, actually the colour reproduction on there is pretty accurate. That's pretty much what I'm getting sitting looking at this. But it's quite a tonal colour as well, or maybe, yes, it is tonal. It's definitely tonal. It's got darker and lighter areas, which makes it look almost like stone to me. Anyway, that's one. Then I have Sphene, S-P-H-E-N-E. I don't know what Sphene or Sphena is, but I mean, it's the same yarn, different colour. And it's that mustardy gold kind of hybrid colour, almost between mustard and gold. It's like old gold, probably more old gold than mustard, but it has that slightly ochre tinge to it. that mustard often has. And then we have Danburite. So I'm guessing these are all the names of different stones. So that's Danburite, which is... I can't quite decide. I mean, it's, I guess, a very pale blue, almost a duck egg. It's got a hint of green, but it's very much a pale blue. And it's almost stonewashed in the look as well. It's got that tonal quality that stonewashing often gives. But then this is a much more solid colour. This is jadeite. So this is telling me that they are based on stones, minerals, rather. And that's a beautiful green. And then we have, is it iolite? Or yes, it looks like iolite, which, I mean, this is an interesting colour. It's kind of blue, kind of green, kind of grey, is how I would describe it, because you've got this pale blue on top and the mint green jadeites below, and it's got a kind of bit of blue and a kind of bit of grey and a kind of bit of green in it. It's difficult to put my finger on exactly what colour that is. What I do know is it's a lovely colour. I'll certainly give it 10 out of 10 for that. I just can't quite put my finger on how I would describe it. It is a grey, but it's also a blue, and it also has green in it. So it's one of those interesting layered colours. So that is, oops, let me get the tags out of the way. That's all 5 of them together. Or it would be if I wasn't hiding one of them. There we are. That's all 5 of them together. So I've no idea. I think I got these just to have heels, toes and cuffs covered on socks. But I've then ended up not particularly using them for that. Partly because I'd forgotten I'd put them in the bag. Don't tell anybody. I'd put them in the wardrobe, at the bottom of the wardrobe. Keep them safe from moths and that kind of thing. And I think I just forgot that they were in there. It happens, doesn't it? We've all done it. It does happen. Anyway, so that's those. I think, I don't know, I might use those actually for my next design, because I do have some ideas about what I want to do next. So I think I've got to finish off formatting the pattern for this and then publish it and then leave that for a little while. But I've got a few ideas buzzing away in my head. I like to do texture, and I like to use different stitch patterns. And I think I will do another crochet pattern, because I think crochet can be the poor Cinderella's sister, sitting by the fireside, never getting taken to the ball of the craft world. People can be quite snooty about crochet. You know, crochet is done by people who can't knit. Well, that's not true, because lots of us can do both, actually. But even if it were, that doesn't make it a lesser skill or a lesser craft. And I just think we need to really use the opportunities we have with so many people being in lockdown and turning to homemade and craft things in order to occupy themselves and to lift their spirits and to help keep them calm and under control during what is a tense time for everybody, I think it would be fair to say, and you know, to really extol the virtues of crochet. So I think, as I say, I've got a couple of ideas buzzing away in the back of my mind. So I think I won't design using those yarns. I will always design using something like Starcraft Special, because if when you're designing, you tend to rip out quite a lot, and I don't want to damage the yarn. I want it to be in the finished item so that it looks spectacular. Whereas with the Starcraft, because it's acrylic, it's a little bit more robust. It gives good stitch definition, and a good overall look, and there are so many different colours available in that range as well, and it's incredibly affordable. So the whole combination of, and this is not a paid promotion by the way, this I like Stylecraft, it's a good go-to acrylic, and it's very soft in the hands, which also helps. So it's very useful for when you're trying things out or developing ideas or just practicing a stitch pattern or whatever. Right, I think I've witted enough. I need to get this video edited. Now there is one other thing I want to mention. I have been doing a couple of virtual, I have a virtual knitting group on a Wednesday, a virtual crafty coffee on a Monday, which is why I've started recording this so late, and I can see it's already 9 o'clock now, and a virtual quiz night on a Sunday, which I've organised with different groups of friends and acquaintances and patrons of the shop and all that kind of thing. And I don't want to leave you all good people out. Now, all of the other virtual sessions I've been able to organise through Facebook Messenger because I am Facebook friends with all of those people. I don't think that's going to be appropriate or straightforward for this particular channel. So I have booked a Zoom recurring meeting, and I will put the code in my link tree, and I will put the link to the link tree in the description down below. I won't put the Zoom code down below because you end up getting all kinds of weird bots and so on following that, but I will put it into the link tree. So that will be on tomorrow evening, Tuesday evening, the 12th of May at 7:30 p.m. BST, British Summer Time, which means that would be, let me think, that will be 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time, which would be 12:30 p.m. Mountain Time and 11:30 a.m. Pacific Time. I will double check those numbers and put them in the description down below anyway. So if you'd like to join in with this virtual craft session, I'm envisaging an hour to 2 hours. You can come and go. I will be in the room a few minutes before 7:30 UK time, so that when you apply to enter the room, I can let you in, as it were, and then we can just have a virtual craft session. It would be quite nice to actually get to speak to some of you, because although you have seen me and spoken to and heard me speak many, many times, I've not really met any of you, and it would be really nice to get to know some of you and spend some time in your company. And I think we could have quite a nice little session. So we can have up to 40 participants. I don't envisage there being 40 of us, but if there are, and that would be lovely. But what you will need to do to take part is to download Zoom either onto a desktop, laptop, tablet or phone, create a free account and log in, and then use the code to enter the room at 7:30 p.m. BST. And the equivalent times elsewhere. So I hope some of you will be able to join us. It would be really nice to see, as I say, to get to know some of you and spend some time with you. You know, we'll see how that goes, and if it goes well, then I hope to make that perhaps a weekly event as well. So if you can't join us this Tuesday, there's always the possibility of next Tuesday instead. So on that note, I will love you and leave you, so stay happy, stay well, stay safe, and keep crafting. So bye for now.